Greetings and blessings. We join together in virtual partnership for soul-searching ponders and to present deep-felt concerns and childlike rejoicing to God's heavenly altar. In the Ottawa Spirit, we blend hopes and prayers and grateful awareness, and through your Holy Spirit, we offer pleas and praises as we lift up the following prayers. Jesus, help politicians focus less on the negatives and more on your hope. Thank you for successful healing for two teammates recovering from injuries. Please help keep me motivated with my team and my coach. Grant grace and strength to those impacted by the war in Ukraine. Help all those dealing with the issues of the hurricanes. For my roommate as she moves into a new relationship. Continued healing for a friend who's battling cancer. Grant hope to friends and family back home coping with the flooding from the hurricane. God give strength to my sister who just lost her house. For our great country and all politicians hoping to run it. Heal those in Israel and all people facing the impacts of politics and terrorism. God be with my brother and sister-in-law as they deal with the after effects of the hurricane. Help me catch up on my classes and help me catch up on my life. Please pray for a friend who's dealing with depression. Help my roommate to get along better with his other friends. Thanksgiving and hope and healing for a friend recovering from a lung transplant. Increase my patience and understanding as I deal with my family's political moods. Strength for a good friend who is dealing with radiation treatments. Jesus, help me as I'm feeling overwhelmed by many things. Thank you for finding us a better apartment. Please give me calm as I deal with all the stresses in my current life. Gracious Redeemer, hear these prayers of blended community and those intentions fully known in the depths of our individual hearts. Grant us all your pardon, your compassion, and the gift of your peace. Give us all experiencing disaster and tragedy, strength and hope, especially those impacted by the recent hurricane. Direct all in complicated times towards you as we can balance and build and pray and play and help build your kingdom on earth. We ask this in your name. Amen. Greetings and blessings. We are broadcasting here from the Martin Meditation Chapel on the campus of Ottawa University in Ottawa, Kansas, and it is a crispy fall day, which is great. It is a crazy busy time. This weekend, our campus ministries here on the Kansas campus will be hosting our Escape weekend out at Pomona Lake, which is always something I look forward to, even though it's sort of vicariously. We'll be helping out doing something with the blessing of the animals with a local church and working at the shelter, and then they'll be making s'mores and frying hamburgers out at the lake for the rest of it out in Pomona. Next weekend, we have our show, Ottawa University Theater here in Kansas. We'll be doing our Heartland Radio Review show. We have about 6 OU peeps. We have 3 high school kiddos. We have 6 community members. And it's going to be neat. It's a radio show with all the old-fashioned bells and whistles. Also a competition for the high school kids to win a prize to see who is the most unique in their acts. Always neat, the launch of that season. And the weekend after that is homecoming here on the Kansas campus and our class reunions. So it is a busy and wonderful time, and one of those neat things about fall with food and feel and fun that comes, and I truly think it's why it's always my favorite time. So the question that I got from a student is interesting, and I think I remember feeling some of this too. The question is this: now that I'm an adult, is it still a sin to disagree with my parents? Well, as much as maybe a parent doesn't want people to know this, I'm not sure if it's a sin to disagree with your parents, frankly. I think that you should, certainly you can honor people by disagreeing too. I think that probably, first off, it's an interesting question, and we have got a number of questions this week that have related to issues, some of them a little more political. You guys know I don't like to deal with the politics piece, but that had to talk about what we talked about last week, which was that concept of sort of truth and real, and where you find those issues where even if you disagreed on things and did it stridently with people that you cared about, how can you come back together at that meal table or at that holiday table or just in life after those disagreements have either been settled or at least have gone dormant, and be family again, or be, whatever your camaraderie is, fellow teammates, fellow city mates, fellow state mates, fellow country mates. How do you go back to that? And we talk some about how in those times of trial, if you think about what's going on right now with the hurricane and the recovery from that, the flooding and all those things, that right now there's wonderful people coming together that don't agree on a lot of things, but they're coming together to help and to hope and to pray and to heal and to work on rebuilding and to sandbag and to do all those things that make a chaplain's heart sing. And they really don't have a lot of time to disagree on stuff. They probably would if they talked about it and had time, but right now they're trying to be the hands and feet of God. They have work to do and people to help. And in those times, it's our best and our brightest. This morning, when I got in the car and I was telling my friend Lee I didn't have my coffee, about half asleep. Just one of those mornings that I didn't wake up terribly well. I'm in the car and I smell something that smells a bit like a wet dog. And I realize that it's me. It's me. Yes, I made the mistake of leaving clothes in the dryer just a little bit too long and a little bit too damp. And it was just the right temperature last night to incubate those into something that smells very, very much like a sweaty Doberman. And unfortunately, after I sort of did that, I realized that it was me, and I was on my way to work, and there's that whole issue that says, oh my goodness, that smell is me. Now, I don't know if you've ever been there, but the beauty of the human spirit is that we, within our body, can go nose blind. It doesn't take that long. And nose blind is the ability for us not to smell ourselves anymore. And so then I would not know that I smelled like a wet dog, but anyone around me in this chapel area or back in the office would know that I did. And then there would be that strange worry where they wouldn't know if it was me or them that smelled like a wet dog, but someone smelled like a wet dog. One of the jokes that we used to have in my family when the kids were little, Linda and I would literally smell things in the fridge and say, does this smell bad to you? Which the kids found uproariously terrifying. Because, of course, if it didn't smell bad to us, we would probably eat it as a leftover. It is wonderful to have that second set of nostrils to tell you whether or not things smell bad. It is wonderful to have someone that you trust enough to say, as you're walking out the door, you smell like a wet dog. It is wonderful. People go ear blind. People go blind to any sense they have. I personally think that my sons, both of them, would be ear blind to their alarm clocks. Linda and I would hear it 2 rooms away, and they would not. They would not hear it. It's not that they hit snooze. They had the ability to. It would beep, 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 getting louder and louder. And one of them had a clock that after a while got so loud, then spun like a strange fan, like a siren going off. And we could hear it enough that it made our teeth jar. Yet he did not, because he was ear blind. I used to wonder if maybe he just wanted to see if we would be so annoyed that we would come in and turn it off. Blindness, then, which in itself can go with any sense, means that you really have to look at the senses. Now, when I was a younger me, there was a really interesting woman named Karen Gravel who wrote a book on teaching, and my first chapter of life was teaching. And she talked about the 19 senses and how you needed to appeal to students in sort of an immersive issue. 19 senses. That's not that Greco issue of the sort of the 5 senses. Well, those were based on senses that tied over to the humors. So there was different colors, bile, red bile and black bile, and those had to do with sight and sound and smell and taste, all those which are legit. But she was talking about appealing to other senses that we didn't classically think. And later on, as a therapist, I would learn that there was all sorts of stuff. And you think about that. Now, as I've dealt with people in death and dying, as I've worked with people who are seniors, one of the big as I've dealt with my own stuff, frankly, guys, there's a really keen awareness to your sense of pain. I have a student in my office right now who injured himself yesterday. And he is sort of going pain blind. He's hurt. I just had a discussion on talking to the trainer and maybe getting an x-ray because he has a very purple foot. But you can go pain blind. You really can. You block out that pain. Sometimes because we just don't want to deal with the injury. Any of those senses, then, if you think about it, and that's it. There's my kids. So right under pain as a sense, there's an interesting issue with pressure or itch. Oh my goodness. Neither Linda nor the boys had a very good ability to block their sense of itch. And all of them were especially prone to be munched on by mosquitoes. And all of them would scratch in their sleep. They couldn't help it. Itch is the response, and it's along those pain receptors where the brain says, hey, do something about that. They didn't have to be awake to do it. With the boys, we tried all sorts of creative things, including Linda putting these weird little mitteny things on them so they wouldn't scratch in their sleep. Those senses then, your sense of time, your sense of thirst, your sense of hunger, all that sensing is how we have the ability to navigate Earth, how we have the ability to sort of figure out where we are as we try to work on our own stuff and on God's plan. And all those things can get off. How many people know someone who has a horrible sense of direction? How many people know someone who really struggles with their sense of time? What seems like an hour was a second. It's sort of brain processing time. Those times when we think that things move really slow, the brain is there's all sorts of stuff with sensing that says that probably God in his wisdom says it's best if we have someone to ask, does this smell okay to you? Does this taste funny to you? That's not disagreeing necessarily. That's keeping people honest. Next week, we're going to talk about that key issue about, am I my brother's keeper? The thing that Cain said to God. And we're going to have to define what brother is. We're going to have to define what keeper is. And that ties in a lot with this question. Because in this case, it really is to say, as an adult, where is that issue where the real may not agree with the proof or the truth of your parents? Is it kind to say to a dad, if you get in the car with them, you smell like a wet dog? I believe so. I believe so. What happens when the dad's nose blind and says, no, I don't, I smell great. I smell like my favorite cologne. When do you argue with that? We talked last week about those concepts of consequence. Do you want someone else to be the person that busts your dad on being stinky? Or do you somehow continue to disagree and find a way to help prove? It's really hard once people have gone nose blind to get them to un-nose blind because the brain's just turned it off. Is it worth it? Remember that worth is time, talent, treasure, troth, truth. Do you play that card that says, I love you and I'm worried? One of those things always that Linda and I did, especially when I was doing something like this, is that I would have her sort of check to make sure my collar was in. We would even do what we called the booger check to make sure there was no bats in the belfry. There is an incredibly kind woman that I work with now whose name is Susan. And many times when I have to do something in the main chapel, I will go ask Susan, am I okay? And she'll make sure my collar's not half out or half in. That's the mark of a friend, a good friend. Someone that you're okay if they say, good grief, you're all whopper-jawed. They fix it. Where is that line then, where it's okay to disagree with a friend, whether that friend is a parent or not? And what's more, where is that line where you're called to be the person, because of your relationship, either with that person or God, to be the mandatory reporter, or the person who checks the clothes, or the person who says you smell like a wet dog? Where does God call, and when does God call? And when he does, to say, okay, you're the person in charge of these things, do you say, here I am, or do you say, not me? Let's listen to Scripture and ponder that a bit in this interesting fall time and see how it will impact our world as Christmas gets nearer. Thanks again for joining. We're always glad you're here.
Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" And I said, "Here I am, send me." He said, "Go and tell this people, be ever hearing, but never understanding. Be ever seeing, but never perceiving. Make the heart of this people calloused, make their ears dull, and close their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn and be healed."
My way, my truth, my life, such a way as gives us breath, such a truth as ends all strife, such a life as killeth death. My light, my feast, my strength, such a light as shows a feast, such a feast as meant in length, such a strength as makes his guest. Come, my joy, my love, my heart, such a joy as none can move, such a love as none can part, such a heart as yours in love.
The harvest is plentiful, the laborers few. And Jesus went out throughout all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest."
So in Isaiah, and that is an Isaiah that I really like. It's that voice that says, "Who do I send? Who's going to go?" And a person saying, "Here I am." Here I am is an interesting thing that you're going then with people that are nose blind, people that are ever hearing and never understanding, ever seeing, never perceiving, calloused hearts. One of the hard things about that is that you have to sort of make sure in the realm of thinking about planks and splinters. So again, the speck of sawdust in your neighbor's eye, your brother's eye, and the plank in your own. You have to make sure that your time, your talent, your treasure, and trust are well accounted for. In other words, in order to make sure that people can trust you and you can trust yourself as far as that wet dog smell and the awareness of that olfactory issues, olfactory fatigue, which is what they call nose blindness. You have to be a hyper smeller. In order to know that this tastes bad, you have to be a hyper taster. It's that concept of not having a lot of things packed in your camel's back. Those packs then that are there that would keep you from going through the gate. It's that concept of making sure that you are more into the factual issues, the proofs, and less into the feeling issues, the truths. Because you truly have to be objective. Because sometimes just because a smell is strong, it doesn't mean it's bad. And sometimes the smell may not be strong and it may be very bad. And if you're that expert, if you're the one who tastes the wine or tastes the food, you have to make sure that you are ready for it. And that's hard. Because if the laborers are few, as we heard in Matthew, then there's a real issue that says you probably will have to be a super taster and a super hearer and a super feeler with a really good sense of direction. God will call you to do multitasking, which is in itself not true, but quick tasking, which is for a bunch of people in a lot of areas because you're the person that'll do it, because you've kept those packs light, because you are interested in finding the real, in proving what is, as opposed to be blinded by truth. How do you get blinded by truth? Well, remember, we go nose blind, ear blind, brain blind, feeling blind. That is all the harsh things that come from things like prejudice, that come from things like judgment. It's why so many systems work hard to say that you have to be presumed innocent until you're proven guilty. Those proofs are incredibly important. And if you are called and you agree to be called, you have an obligation to make sure that you don't get the head cold if you can help it, and if you do, you tap out. That you are able to make sure that you don't wear too much cologne yourself, because if you do, you won't know whether or not that wet dog smell is coming from them, there, or you. There is an obligation then to that kind of disagreement. And it's not even disagreement. It's the commitment to fact, the commitment to what is real, and the commitment to do that using God's commands, I guess. But remember that God doesn't command us to go. We have to agree. If we agree, then, even if we have to disagree with someone's self-perceptions, with their own truths, we've sort of signed up to be the mirror holders. And even if people don't like what they see in the mirror, as long as we work to keep the mirror clean and hold it steady, because we told God we would, we're doing what we committed to do. Not just to God, but to God's plan. Does that always make people happy? Well, no, that's that whole mirror on the wall. I'd love a mirror that made me look skinnier or more handsome, but a good, accurate mirror is the best to shave in, guys. That's just it. I think that there's something comforting, maybe it's the older you get, when you have some validation in what your truth is and the ability for it to be proved as factual. There was a time, and I've had it happen a couple of times, and this has to do with eating, the sense of eating imagery, where I was shaving in the morning and I looked in the mirror and I didn't recognize myself. Truly, that somewhere in there my sense of aging had changed. I used to not have so much silver in my beard. And I remember thinking, well, I look a lot like my dad. That mirror then allowed me to process a truth as a fact that I would not have done. Now, I don't mind looking like my dad, but on any given day, I don't feel like this. So there is a reconciliation that comes with truth and fact. I am so grateful at this stage of my life, especially with the kids grown and Linda in heaven, when someone can tell me whether I've misbuttoned something or my collar's out. Because I would hate to finish a chapel, either a broadcast or a live chapel, and realized I was all whopper-jawed. I know that people don't come to a chapel to see me. They come to hear our discussions, to join in, but still, there's nothing worse than going back and looking in the mirror and realizing that you missed a button and you were this way. I would not be upset at all if someone told me. I would be relieved if they told me before a lot of people saw it. I would really be sad if somebody told me after chapel was done. Great service. Too bad that you can't button your shirt. For that question that talks about then, is it okay? Is it a sin to disagree? Isn't it? It's never a sin to stand by the reality of things. It's never a sin to use God's lens to adjudicate things. Make sure that what you're smelling is not yourself. Make sure that if you hold something as truth, that it's real. Because the risk, if you don't do those things, is hypocrisy. Something that we hear all about with the Pharisees. They're not good judges. How do you judge then the worth of things? We talked about cost, value, and worth. For those of you that are old like me who remember strange things like Cabbage Patch Kids and Beanie Babies and things that people spent a ton of money on that now aren't worth much, you will understand that sometimes if you don't have God's scale on how to judge things and we just trust what we feel, we can be absolutely dyslexic in the feelings on how we do it. It just doesn't work out. At the end of the day, it's important then to use the scale as established by God, to make sure that your palate is clean and cleansed and ready. And if you're lucky and smart and blessed, to pull in friends, to ask if this smells okay, if this tastes okay, to even find a consensus as God's people on what the judgment is and how it relates to the scale of God. And if you do that, not only is that not a sin, that is probably the best thing as body parts that we can do to further God's plan. Next week, again, we're going to talk about sort of what's in that backpack and whether or not we're supposed to be our brother's keeper. Let's talk about our charge for this week then and close out in prayer. This week, I would encourage us all to pay a lot of attention to any sense in us that might be blind. We talked last week about how we're going to reconcile again with people we've disagreed with when we all come back to ourselves, especially after the end of politics and election cycles. See if there's anything that because of the noise that you don't want to deal with, because the alarm is so loud, that you just don't notice anymore. See if there's anything in the back of your fridge that stinks to high heaven that you just don't notice when you walk in your kitchen. See if somehow you need to empty the trash in your dorm room and you don't know anymore because it's been tuned out. Find those sensical ways so that you can better sense when other people are hungry or thirsty or naked. You need to make sure that you know when you are. So this week, pay attention to yourself. Pay attention to your surroundings and your environment. And pay attention to how those impacts the nose twitches that people have when they come into your dorm room, so that you know that maybe part of what you were blind to is still impacting others. That is your charge, my charge too. Hopefully I won't have too many times next week when I get in the car and smell like a wet dog, and you won't either. Let's close in prayer. God, help us not to be blind, or more importantly, if we are blind, help us to see. We know that you have the ability through your blessing and grace to help cure us of those things, to reset us when we are nose blind or brain blind or eye blind or any of those things, so that we are again pure receptors of what is real. You built us that way, but you also built it so it's awfully easy for us just to eat that apple and fall dumb. Eat that apple and grow numb. Eat that apple and judge others and not recognize the reality in our lives. Help us then to find that balance, to be able to be keenly aware of the plank in our own eyes, even before we worry about sawdust in someone else's. To not be plank blind, to the kind of things that we have put upon us to allow your light yoke to make us clean so that we can best adjudicate what is out there in the world of sense, what is out there in the world of feeling, and what is out there where you've called us to stand up and say, here I am, I come to do your will. Give us that grace this week, next week, going into the holidays, so that even though there's not enough laborers, we can be that multitasking laborer that can do 10 times more than the average bear, so that we can truly further your plan to make sure that man, woman, and child hit goal in a safe and non-stinky way. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Dona nobis pacem pacem. Dona nobis pacem. Dona